Welcome to the Cybersecurity and Cloud Podcast, the podcast where we learn from cybersecurity experts how to stay safe, private, and secure on the cloud and in code. CSCP is hosted by Francesco, your cybersecurity friend with a passion for all things cyber and sharing stories of other professionals with you. This episode is brought to you by the generosity of Phoenix Security Limited. Phoenix helps startups and enterprises solve complex software security supply chain visibility by leveraging the power of correlation and contextualization. Discover how Phoenix Security helps CISO and security engineers act fast, prevent burnout, and implement DevSecOps at the speed of cloud. Phoenix Security. Correlate, contextualize, and act on risk with one click. Let's dive in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cybersecurity and Cloud Podcast. This is your host, Francesco, and today we dive deeper on a subject that we haven't touched in quite a while. We usually touch into vulnerability management, into security, into what you do before you write code, while you write code, and after you write code. So I'm here with Aizhar, good friends, part of the threat modeling manifesto, and a few new things that he's going to introduce. But I'll let Aizhar, the principal security architect at SiriusXM, introduce himself, give a little bit of background, and the whole community around threat modeling that has been rocking the scene in the past with the new threat modeling manifesto and new things going. Aizhar, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. And yeah, as Francesco said, I am a senior principal architect, security architect at SiriusXM right now. I have been at Datadog, at Squarespace, Autodesk, Bridgewater, bunch of different industries, always dealing with broad security, application security, threat modeling mostly, and managed to get some long and nice and interesting experience and exposure to many of the problems that we deal with day after day in this industry.
Brilliant. And on that subject, actually, where are we with the industry? Because I feel that in the past 2 years, we've been on a journey that has been quite rocking, where application security has been revolutionized quite drastically, with cloud security coming into the picture, with the philosophy, you build it, you own it, you run it, versus SRE. Versus observability. There's been a lot of new terms brought into the space, and also a lot of new regulation with the SPOM in the US, with the new SDLC guidance. Been so much excitement in a field that I'm so excited to see maturing finally after 10 years. I think 10 or 20 years or was.
I think that the people who are most excited nowadays are CISOs, and perhaps not excited in a good way, because this train called responsibility is coming harder their way. But not that they didn't have it before, but now we are seeing consequences of becoming real and more material. But where we are, I think that you put it in a very good way. We have a lot of additions to the industry. We have a lot of new acronyms, basically one every day. Sometimes I think that we have companies out there that are paying for the creation of acronyms rather than the creation of technologies.
I'm not guilty at all in that space.
Right?
By creating ASPM.
Yeah. I think that we are in a better place, if not for the solutions that we are presenting ourselves, for the way that we are asking questions. I think that for a long time, we had these things written in stone. This is how you do application security. This is how you do network security. And those are the ways. But then disciplines around us, like DevOps and all that kind of good stuff, started pushing security people in different directions and having us readapt to processes that weren't in place before, and even to ways that people look at products that they weren't looking at before. So I think that the best thing that I can say is that it's an industry in constant evolution, and we are being led, if not by necessity, at least by interest. Mm-hmm. People are showing that they want security and they want to do the right thing, and are just saying, give me a way that I can work with you, rather than going back to the old model of you guys do your security thing and we here do our product thing.
Yeah, I think you hit spot on, and it's a trend that I've seen in the industry and with few of my direct clients. There is still a divide between you build it, you own it, versus there is this development team that does this development stuff. It has its own set of tooling, and then you plonk it into an environment that is called operation. That was supposed to be the stuff that we shuttered with DevSecOps or with DevOps even. And I think DevOps has failed or has started the initial wave, but ended up, in my opinion, DevOps being just agile. And I think the second wave of this was the security champion program, the threat modeling, that started to bring even less there, the whole tooling, the whole methodology, the whole thinking. And I think that had more success at DevSecOps, where it ended up being, here's your tooling to implement DevSecOps. What do you think?
A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to our friends, Chris Romeo and Matt Coles in our podcast, and we half joked that we have shifted ourselves left off the table. Now people are talking about shift everywhere. Hell if I know what that means.
It's actually shift up, shift down, shift left, shift right, shift everywhere.
It's almost, I won't do the obvious joke here. It's too crass. But the thing is that I think that the danger that we are running here is in losing direction. The moment that before we had this shift left thing, and it gave us a direction. Okay, we wanted which process we wanted to simplify, which processes we wanted to embed, and that gave us a better place to go to. The moment you start talking about shift everywhere, beyond being marketing speak, you dilute the thing, right? Because the sense that I feel, the sense that I make of somebody telling me shift everywhere is basically sprinkle security everywhere.
I think that's why the world got it wrong. I think with product security and the whole philosophy behind shift everywhere was, okay, you shift left, you put the tool and the methodology early in the DevOps process or the development process, call it whatever you want. Don't forget the right, don't forget operation, production, runtime, because that's really important to contextualize, prioritize, and the whole marketing spiel that you want to play that. But there was a leg that I think was missing, that shift everywhere was the original philosophy of shift everywhere was bring the business in and report to the business up. So shift up and shift down. So bring the information to the business, make them aware of where they are from a product security perspective. And you can't do that by just looking at the code or just looking at production. Was squashing in left and right. So shift left, shift right, back into a full stack view. And then making the business aware with risk methodology or any kind of methodology to actually inform them of the risk. Because I think the case of SolarWinds, Sullivan, and the whole thing was a CISO is not responsible for making risk-based decisions. It should be the business. And that's where shift everywhere should have been. Now, unfortunately, we're in an industry where a bunch of marketers get excited and butcher the term that was created for a specific reason, including shift left, including ASPM, including, I don't know, you name it, any term, for a good and a bad reason. I think as an industry and as security people, we get easily excitable about new stuff. And hence a new term, a new concept, a new methodology. Ooh, let's forget about all the boring stuff we were trying to fix and let's focus on a new way to fix the old stuff. I think that's a problem in the industry of more people with ADHD than what we should or like.
I think that, okay, so the lifetime of a security practitioner, to me, it gets divided based into what you just described for the first, I don't know, half or something. But then when you hit your head on the wall enough times, you become this jaded, cynical, realistic, pessimistic person that says, listen, risk exists. Let's just deal with this, right? And you stop looking at all the shiny stuff that comes down the pipe because it becomes, I've seen this before. It just had a different name. Mm-hmm. So this whole reporting structure and bringing risk up and down into everybody, we've been doing this for decades now, right?
But not in AppSec.
Even in AppSec, yeah. The problem is that for a long time, we've been speaking to ourselves. And in the past few years, we have this thing, DevSecOps, or I don't know what it's called this week, where we have to go and talk to developers and present results in a language and in tools that they know and they know how to work, right? So I think that we are still in that phase of trying to put a round plug in a square hole, because we said that this is the way that it goes. But the good news is that we are slowly filling the gaps of that plug and getting the whole picture in a way that, as you mentioned, for example, SPM, the whole picture of risk is becoming clear to developers.
Mm.
And we are starting to close that loop from design to deployment and maintenance, and being able to give people different facets of the risk that they are under. And I think that we have a lot, you mentioned solar wind, I think that we have a lot to thank, actually, to this whole third-party risk scene, where developers are finally understanding that the issue of security is not only the code that they themselves write, but the codes that they inherit. And as we know, for people who get an open ticket, and let's be honest here, one of the most rewarding things that can happen to a ticket is assign it to somebody else, right?
I thought it was closing it.
Ask around.
It's a different level of dopamine involved in assigning.
There's a level of schadenfreude in there where you get very happy when you can just pass the problem along to someone else. But the thing with the third-party risk is to be able to recognize that when you are bringing in functionality from the outside, you are actually bringing also risk from the outside. That, I think, was a big eye-opener for a lot of developers. And in my experience, many of them came to think, wait, if I'm inheriting that risk, who am I giving risk to by the stuff that I myself write, right? So then it comes into the, hey, I want to be the best developer I can, and all of a sudden my code being secure is part of being the best. It's not only performant, it's not only elegant, it also has to be secure. So I see a lot of goodness coming from this, not sudden, but this high profile realization of the third party of the supply chain risk.
I think, and I think I agree with you. That was driven by the whole compromising of a package. Now we realize that packages are actually living in our code and being part of our application. But also made bad actor or threat actor realize there is a easy and soft shell that can be rooted with 2 or 3 success factors.
This episode is brought to you by the generosity of Phoenix Security Limited. Phoenix helps startups and enterprises solve complex software security supply chain visibility by leveraging the power of correlation and contextualization. Phoenix platform connects to your repositories, scanners, and cloud, correlates all the information, and provides you with a prioritized list of vulnerabilities that need to be addressed first. Discover how Phoenix Security helps CISOs and developers remove friction and maximize the use of DevSecOps professionals at phoenix.security. Phoenix Security, correlate, contextualize, and act on risk with one click.
British Airways was the first case where somebody took over an account and injected malicious code. Even worse than SolarWinds, because they injected it directly in the package that was delivered to the client. So it was completely invisible to the organization. When at least they were running it, somebody could detect it. So it took more time to detect that. But the whole structure of, like, you inherit a package coming from somewhere, you need to assess that package in a certain way, and then you need to include it in your code. That becomes part of the third-party risk. Right now, unfortunately, third-party risk is pretty much pen test a bunch of company from outside and give it a score. And that's about it. That's the whole industry being driven. So I think we have 2 third-party risks. We have softer third-party risk that is still maturing. And then we have the easy third-party risk that is a scorecard that is sitting somewhere and somebody can review your organization, and then you have to do ClickOps exercise to accept or ignore the vulnerability that somebody else had kindly tried to identify for you.
I see all the good stuff that you mentioned as like support material, right? And it's very welcome, and there's great stuff in there, and it's necessary. But to me, the big takeaway is that one of the flags that I've been waving around for a long time is that developers don't treat security the way that they treat, for example, performance. You're bringing a new developer into the company, you're interviewing them. You interview them for performance. Hey, how can you turn around a tree or sort this thing in whiteboard exercises? But very rare is the place that asks them, now, how do you do that securely? Because they are expected to know performance. They are not expected to know security. And
it's not in OKR. Like
Hmm?
it wasn't a business requirement, or it wasn't an OKR. It wasn't something. That's why I go back to the shift everywhere. It wasn't why we never involved the business to actually drive those as hard fact terms. Security is important for us, but what that means from a software development perspective, we never crystallized them. It means 5-story point. It means reducing the risk. It means developing secure code. It means achieving zero critical on a piece of code. It means updating all the library in 3 days. We never actually formalized. So the business said, I want to be secure, but how do I do that? And I think that was always the inflection point or the friction point. And then on the opposite side, we had SLA. So service level agreement, people that push, you shall fix all of the library in there yesterday.
But that's the thing. Again, to me, what that translates to is we keep looking for silver bullets. Give me the one tool that's going to solve all my security problems so that my developers can do their stuff and security will happen. And developers don't get the time to be trained. They don't get sometimes even the requirement to be trained in security. The SLAs that they get don't take into consideration a whole lot of factors that come around fixing those things. They are just hard SLAs. Hey, you have a critical, you have 2 days. You have a high, you have. But I think that the point that I'm trying to make is that we have this huge industry. We have thousands and thousands of tools, and the user of those tools still keep looking for that shining silver bullet that's going to solve all the problems. And they don't realize that the problem begins and basically ends with them, with the developer. And until they change the way that they work, they stop seeing security as a burden and start seeing security as part of what they do, part of the discipline that they decided to work on as performance. That's not going to change. That's always going to be somebody running after a silver bullet.
I agree and disagree. I think security, like authentication, where like any other pieces of component of software, is being seen as a burden right now because the business doesn't put the right weight next to it. If you're part of your evaluation, either as a hiring or as a quarterly evaluation, is based on how many story points did you spend on security or how much risk did you manage to reduce? And I keep on coming back at risk, not because I'm obsessed by risk.
You're right.
It's the language, but it also, I saw it really give freedom. And I hate SLA, and I've wrote pamphlets, and I've wrote manifestos, and I've wrote books around smashing SLA and moving into a risk-based approach because I saw with my own eyes that it worked. Moving away from pure, you shall fix this in X amount of time. And don't get me wrong, from a regulatory perspective, that's okay. But then you build some intelligence behind it and you say, you should reduce risk, and you let the whole team decide what it means. It might mean not doing it and being bashed in the head because of not doing it, not reducing, not meeting certain targets. Otherwise, doing 5 story point a week, a sprint, or dedicating an entire sprint to upgrading a framework or to upgrading a library. You're not anymore forcing all these things onto the development community as clock and timeline because everything works in a different way. And if we keep putting the process, a very strict process around development community, having agile, we're always going to fail because it's always going to feel restrictive. I don't know. What do you think?
Look at it this way. On a visceral level, I agree with you completely. But look at the amount of process that you just described. Points, and this, and that, and agility, and velocity, and speed, and this and the other one. Developers want to write code, and we keep overburdening them with process, right? At the end of the day, if they take that step forward, moving security into part of the discipline that they do, I don't have to specially be trained in security because I understand security, I understand the principles of security, and I avoid creating risk.
But they're not motivated by it.
The motivation here is that because you have all that process to lower the risk that you already identified, the motivation is don't create risk in the first place. We keep creating more and more risk. Why? Because we are not going back to the roots and saying, what if, I don't know, crazy idea, I just stopped creating risk? And that's why in my personal crusade, in the last few years, I have been making a very conscious attempt to stop talking risk to developers and start talking priority instead. Because risk, at the end of the day, you get to what? Probability times impact, right?
Yeah.
Two values that developers have absolutely no idea, no interest in what they mean.
I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. In fact, you shouldn't talk priority with the developer, but with the Scrum Master, with the product owner, with anybody that talks about that. Like from a developer perspective, they should have a list of what do I need to do and fix next week. Period.
Yeah,
they shouldn't care about
all.
Exactly, as simple as that. We shouldn't as a security, we shouldn't talk security to the developer. We should help them understanding what it means. But ultimately, we should give them a clean list of action, not for the whole month, not for the whole year, but for next week.
Yeah,
because that's how they work.
And you know what? Even on threat modeling, which is like possibly the most removed security activity from code, I don't talk to people about risks anymore. I talk to them in terms of, okay, we identified these possible things that could go wrong. Now, this one is more important than that one. So if the mitigation for this one is harder, it's still more important than that one. So let's not do things because they're easy. Let's do things because they are a priority, right?
Or because they have biggest risk reduction.
but that's something that becomes hidden in the priority, which is a whole discussion. At the end of the day, if you put those two sets of people, one in front of the other, security practitioners and developers, engineers, the conversation about risk between them, unfortunately, goes into metrically different directions, because the engineering wants to lower that risk as much as they can. They want to say that risk is as low as they can to justify the fact that they want to work on features. And security wants to say that risk is as high as possible because they want people to work on security issues.
But we're talking to the wrong people.
So that's why I'm saying, if you hide the risk behind priority, which is something that developers are more willing to accept, hey, you know what? We are working on this product, and as you said, I talked to your product owner, and we agreed that this thing is high priority.
Spot on. You talk to the product owner. The security don't talk to the product owner.
But now we get to that first discussion, a discussion of what has changed between AppSec and product security, right? My personal feeling is that product security is just AppSec doing marketing. I'm basically talking now to people and selling security not as a cost center. I'm selling security as a feature. Hey, how cool would it be if you could say that your product is not only the best in class, but it's also secure, right?
How do you convince people in doing something that is fundamentally friction, right? You need to sell that.
By showing them that, yes, it's nice to have this new shiny feature, but what's the point of having it if tomorrow morning somebody's going to point to your product and say, I just went there and I extracted 300 million records from customers all over the world, and by the way, here's the list of SSNs and passwords, right? So yeah, you got the shiny feature, but
I think the regulation is coming into place to save us, because right now everybody's getting breached. So everybody's getting used to a disclosure of breach. So it's not anymore a new thing, or it's not anymore an impacting thing. So having data breach has not the same allure or stake they used to have, 5 years ago.
Look, then we get into a big discussion here of almost ethics, right? Because I don't want to be forced to do the right thing by regulation. I want to do the right thing because it's the right thing.
But it's a business driver.
Yeah. But for so many years, we have been trying to tell people this is the right thing to do. And we've been hearing, yeah, but it costs money. It costs time. So yes, I welcome regulation because it's going to give us a stick, right? Where beforehand, we didn't quite have one.
We go back to risk.
No, do I want to word that led by that, where security is led by regulation and not by this is the right thing to do, well, that becomes a personal thing.
A balance, I think a balance of the two. You can leverage regulation to do what's right, or to the perception of impact, and I go back to risk, is bigger if there is a bigger consequence and a bigger likelihood of somebody getting hit by a specific regulation, hit a specific thing. The possibility of a breach, there isn't brand image, yes, but you can recover, and the market has shown that you can recover. You can lose potentially market share, but then you can recover. It's not as heavy as not being able to trade forever, or losing your trading license, or losing the ability to potentially pass credit card. Those things are much, I don't know, the stick is much bigger, and hence the perception and the leverage that we have in the conversation with the product owner. If you don't do this, you're not going to access this market. If you don't do this security control, you're never going to be able to access or get a banking license or access this new market. It's a bigger driver to prioritize security and go to that list of important things that ultimately the developer want. Because as a development community, we don't care if it's high risk, low risk, if it's new market, lower market. I would just want to know, what do I need to solve tomorrow? Or what do I need to build tomorrow? And how does it look like? And to whom I should talk with? And then leave me be.
That's right. But consider that you are, if I hear right what you're putting on the table here, you are automatically focusing on industries that reach into regulated markets, into sensitive data and things like that. But on the other end of the scale, you have the regular guy that's just writing a CRM for, I don't know, I'm just going to throw it out there, yoga teachers. Okay? Other teachers love me some yoga, respect for the teachers, but not exactly the public that wakes up in the morning and think, oh, security of my customers. No, they go and they buy a CRM and they use it for their classes and whatever. But you know what? I'm putting my credit card information in there. Mm-hmm. I, as a customer, want to feel safe that my information is being well kept, right? But because it's not a regulated thing, because it's not a high-risk thing for whomever is writing that thing, perhaps they will, as Chris would say, they will run that and be happy about it, right? To put things onto regulation, to me, creates a false feeling of security, because it creates that bright spot where everybody is looking at, but the dark spot on the other side where risk still exists goes hidden. And until developers that work on both spots understand that the code that they create, the systems that they create, have to be secure, that's not going to change. We are still putting, it's the kid with the fingers in the dam. Mm-hmm. You just keep putting fingers on every hole that appears. We are putting fingers in there. Meanwhile, we should be thinking about building a better dam.
I agree, but the industry that usually gets regulated at first, that drives its finance and specific regulated environment, and then the other one kind of follows, or tech industry. The surprise that I got in this season of my career and life is that every industry got regulated with SPOM, with a push towards security, with security label finally, that is start going back out, and a security scorecard of security names next to it. The good and the bad, it is going to drive.
You know, the other day I was reading a packet from a company that deals with highly sensitive personal data. And they had one of those, here's why you can work with us packets. And in their policy, they write things like, oh, we do A, B, and C. And then, but in some cases, we may not do it. So from a regulation point of view, hey, everything is there. They do A, B, and C. But they are not telling me what the selectors for that but is. So they can choose where not to do A, B, and C. And I don't have any visibility in that. From a regulation side of things, they're fine. They're fine. They did everything that they needed. Now, from a practical point of view, can I feel 100% safe and secure in what they did? No. And they have armies of standing lawyers that will happily argue anything in court. Meanwhile, 300 million people lost their private records.
So how do we fix this with threat modeling?
So we use threat modeling at whatever step of the life cycle of a product may be, to point out to developers the priority of the risks that they may be creating and how to solve it, and how they should be trained in the stack that they work in, and in the industry that they're working in, and in the deployment that they work in, to do that in a safe manner. We use threat modeling to identify classes of issues that we can solve perhaps at the design or the library level, to create guardrails that we can give to developers to make it easier for them to create a secure and safe by design and private by design environment. I would say that without wanting to pull it too much in my direction, threat modeling is the one activity in the SDLC that you can actually intertwine and use together with all the other activities and still extract value from it or enrich the other activities. So if somebody's thinking about pushing their SDLC program to the next level, look at the threat modeling first and foremost.
And we have two, I think I've been discussing with Chris as well that's on this, and I think we have two generational threat modeling. We have the pure network-driven, the asset where you put it, threat modeling, which are the attack path. Do I have a firewall? Do I have a WAF? Do I have this? Okay, threat modeling done. And then you have the business logic, software-specific, more intertwined inside code, threat modeling. And we have two generational people that do threat modeling, unfortunately.
Okay, so I'm totally going to cop out here. I think that it's more complicated and simpler at the same time. Why is it more complicated? Because we have a lot of different methodologies out there that somebody that wants to start in threat modeling has to sit down and look at them and decide which one is the right one for me. And no, there isn't one better than the other. There's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad, there's a lot of appropriate, there's a lot of less appropriate. And me, myself, when I'm threat modeling in one given place, I could use one or two or something new, depending on the circumstances. And it's simple because at the end of the day, if you go back to documents like the Threat Modeling Manifesto, where we adopted Adam Shostak's 4 questions, you just want to know, what are you building? What could go wrong? What are you going to do about it? Did you do a good job? There's a bunch of other smaller questions that can be asked, but at the end of the day, it's just those 4, right? You may need or want to make the thing more complicated than it actually is, but that's the root of the thing.
Agree. I think there is a fundamental problem that is still how we look at application. We look at threat modeling in the same way we look at application. An application lives atomically in a build file, in a library, in a piece of code that the dev team has created without the whole logic of where it runs. And then an application that lives and runs in a particular environment, and people look at it from a pure network perspective, where attacker is going to come. Attacker don't care. They will come from a library, from a repository, from a stolen key in your CICT, from a stolen key in your repo, from an attack on or your weakest link that could be your developer, your operational engineers who has access to your production. It can be across the line, and threat modeling can be one or the other. It should be everything. Of course, that's overwhelming because you need to consider 400 different options and 400 different things, but there is a stage where you do different things and you triage as well different things in your traditional cycle of vulnerability management, of that golden priority list of things that you need to do, because you can even map a threat modeling finding into the evidence of stuff that you could find. Okay, somebody could attack us from a supply chain. How many libraries do we have that are vulnerable? Oh, we have 400 libraries that are vulnerable. Maybe that's a threat that actually we should take care of. Or yeah, how do we store keys? We don't have a key store management. That's an evidence that risk is actually going to manifest with a much more higher likelihood.
Mm-hmm.
But that requires an inside knowledge though, of how you build and how you run it. That I think is still the fundamental crux of the problem.
Here's the thing. At the end of the day, threat modeling is the sum of 2 different processes, right? One is system modeling and the other is threat elicitation. So you have to be able to figure out what is it that you're building. What are the pieces? What are the moving pieces? What are the fixed ones? Where is thing going? Who's talking to whom? That's the system modeling. The threat elicitation is being able to look at the thing and say, here's where something could break. Here's where somebody could go in. Here's where I'm using a token that perhaps has too much information in it and stuff like that. Now, the system modeling, I think that at this point in time, we can safely say that 99% of the cases, we know what we're building. We may not, one person most of the time will not know the totality of the thing, especially because of the layers that you pointed out. One will know the business logic, one will know the deployment, one will know the network part. And the real problem here goes back to the threat elicitation. How is it that looking at that thing that I'm building, I'm able to divine, imagine, figure out the things that could go wrong without falling back to that think like a hacker thing? Open up the engine of my car and say, think like a mechanic. Call an Uber because you're not going anywhere. I have no clue. So why am I asking developers and network people and the ops people to do that? So again, it goes back to education. You have to know not only how to do the things right, but how not to break things. And one example that I usually refer to is the object relational mapping things, the ORMs, that at some point we said, hey, these are the solution for all SQL injection problems in the world. But we forget that these libraries always have the .execute thing that let you get some string, build it and put it in there and call the thing and bypass the whole goodness of the ORM. And there will always be the developer that will say, oh, you know what? I'm smarter than the guy who wrote this thing. Let me do my query by myself. Again, education, until people figure out that, hey, this is part of their job, we are always going to go back to those things. I can't see what can go wrong if I'm not looking for it, if I'm not educating myself in the environment that I live. What are the things that could actually go wrong? So again, just bringing everything together. Threat modeling, guardrails and secure by design, private by design. Tools at the implementation time, tools at the deployment time, runtime, all bringing all this together into a vision of risk, understanding the risk appetite, putting that together in an equation that actually expresses not risk, but priority. That, I think, is where this industry is rapidly going to. And hopefully we're going to achieve these soon so that we can deal with other interesting problems that we still have. But going back to that 2 stages in the life of the security practitioner, I think that at this point, I am close to escape velocity from the jaded, cynical one back to the, oh, shiny thing one. So because of where the industry is going. So I think that at the end of the day, I'm an optimist.
And I'm excited as well where things are going. So what you build, where you run, understand what you build and where you run, communicate that in risk, use any SPM tool that enable you to visualize that vision in risk, communicate that with a product owner and promote a product security culture. And what that product security is, probably we're going to cover in another episode because that's a whole bag of angry cats that we're going to unleash on the internet. But yeah, if we want to summarize as well, a positive, addition, we have a positive message that we usually close the podcast with. And you alluded to already, and I'm excited as well. So I haven't been excited about application security up until last 3 years ago. That should be my positive message. What's your positive message, Aizhar?
That what we're doing is important. It matters. And that people are starting to see that and giving us the support and the voice in the table that we've been asking for so long. And that now it's on us to make the best use that we can of that voice.
And if somebody wants to find more about Threat Modeling Manifesto, the new publication, you and what you write and what you think about these things, where can they find you?
So they can go to threatmodelingmanifesto.org. Oh, now you got me. It's too early in the morning. Threatmodelingmanifesto.org. org.
We'll put link in the
we'll
comment.
Put a link in there. And two things in there: the threat modeling manifesto itself, and last week we have published the threat modeling capabilities document, which is a follow-up to the manifesto. And to see stuff that Matthew Coles and I have been working on in our book, and that you can go to threatmodeling.dev. That one I remember well.
Brilliant. Aizhar, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was a fantastic conversation around
Thanks for having
product
me.
security, application security, the modern application security. So It's exciting. It's exciting time. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And everybody else, stay safe. Practice your safe application security. Try to practice your threat modeling in a safe way or unsafe way, thinking like a hacker or not, but just do it. And aggregate everything, prioritize everything. Please tell your dev just the next 5 things, 10 things from a security side that they need to focus on, not here's a backlog of 1,200,000 tickets. Now you choose, Mr. Developer. This is Francesco Cipollone, your host. It was a pleasure to speak to Aizhar, and everybody, stay safe out there. Goodbye.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcast and post it on social media tagging Cybersecurity Cloud Podcast for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. Discover other episodes at www.cybersecuritypodcast.com.